Yes, I did see the announcement in the Charlotte Observer just about an hour ago relating to a statement made by Attorney General Barr concerning election fraud in 2020. We're going to get to that later in the show. I want to stick in the first five what I planned on talking about, which is this announcement by Project Veritas, which is the organization we've talked about many times on the show. They basically, Veritas meaning truth, Project Veritas has dived in and looked at the question of, looks at various issues and organizations to basically get at stories that you otherwise won't get them to admit to. What was announced this morning, James O'Keefe of Project Veritas announced as he was live streaming on a call that he has for the last 2 months had access to and been on the CNN morning call. CNN, the Communist News Network, or whatever that really stands for, I don't know, but the CNN network, very leftist network, has a morning call with a variety of editors and media people, and somehow, as he says, O'Keefe says, through some assistance to Project Veritas, he's been on those calls. So on the call this morning, he announced that he's been hearing these calls for 2 months and recording them, and that starting tonight, he's going to release little by little the kinds of things are said on these calls that are obviously intended to be private calls among CNN and their otherwise left-wing media affiliates. So Matt the Wonderful has a quick clip to play. This is James O'Keefe from Project Veritas.
You're unmuted.
Hey, Jeff Zucker, you there? Hey,
yes.
This is James O'Keefe. We've been listening to your CNN calls for basically 2 months, recording everything. Just wanted to ask you some questions if you have a minute. Do you still feel you're the most trusted name in news? Because I have to say, from what I've been hearing on these phone calls, I don't know about that. I mean, we got a lot of recordings that indicate you're not really that independent of a journalist.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. So everybody, in light of that, I think what we'll do is we'll set up a new system, and we'll be back with you. We'll do the rest of the call a little bit later.
We're going to release those recordings today at 7 o'clock. So stay tuned. It's going to be fun.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
So you just heard me talk to the president of CNN, Jeff Zucker, and inform him that that we are going to release a number of recordings today. I unmuted myself into the conference line, and they're still on there. They're listening to me right now. This is being live streamed for those of you still on the call. And we've recorded for a while, and we have clips of various producers talking, the president talking, describing their motives, describing their political philosophy, describing how they don't cover certain things and certain political parties tell them to cover things a certain way. Lots of little clips that takes us into the minds and hearts of our people, powers that be, that inform us, because government is downstream from media. So we're going to be releasing these tapes thanks to one of our sources. One of our brave insiders has given us this information. And as you can see, they're still milling about on the call. They're listening to me right now. They have to, quote, change their system and get a different dial-in, I guess, now, because we've compromised the dial-in.
Okay, I have to tell you, we're going to get right to our guest today. I love having Dr. Piper on, but I want to make one little other comment in this first five about CNN. Generally speaking, the reason Project Veritas does the things that they do is because they're uncovering things that, and it isn't always Democrats or left-wingers, it can be conservative organizations. They're hiding things from the public, and the public is being deceived and misled about them. And these are issues of grave, important consequence. For example, Project Veritas, were the ones who broke the story that Planned Parenthood was actually engaged in the ongoing practice of selling baby body parts. And of course, something Planned Parenthood denied at first, and then because of recordings that Project Veritas was able to uncover and play for America, you could then see the truth of what Planned Parenthood was doing. Project Veritas does this, has had many extraordinary, really kind of newsworthy stories. They've broken to America that we'd otherwise never know. I can imagine some people in this particular example thinking, well, this is kind of bad because CNN obviously thought they had a bunch of people on these morning Zoom calls, or I don't even know if they're Zoom, but morning calls whom they trusted. They thought it was a private call. And so they were speaking openly, talking about how they try very hard, I'm sure, things like don't want to say anything that make Biden look bad. We want to make sure Trump looks bad on this issue. I mean, they were strategy calls and they were assumed to be private. I think some people might listen to this and think, well, gee, I wouldn't like it very much if my organization I thought was a private call, and here, lo and behold, the worst enemy was out there. Someone was recording me. I don't think that most people would like it. And I think you'd have that reaction, and it's an understandable reaction. But I want to encourage you not to buy into that line of thinking. Number one, CNN holds itself out to be a journalistic organization. They actually claim they're journalists. They actually claim that they provide facts and are truthful. They have been the most biased, radical, left-wing, obnoxious network since their creation. I mean, just simply presenting as fact their basically left-wing editorial agenda all the time. Second is, CNN was among the many left-wing outlets that went out of their way to make sure that the average American who doesn't have time to dive in and read the facts, go to websites, read stories, listen to conservative outlets, many average Americans had no idea about the Hunter Biden laptop, about the emails that were uncovered on Hunter Biden's laptop, and about the fact that those emails compromised not only Hunter Biden, but his father, Joe Biden. CNN covered that up, barely ran the story. In fact, they ran it. The few times they mentioned it that I heard them, they were denigrating it as false, misleading, there's nothing harmful on there, that kind of story. And right after, I think it was on election night, as people were leaving the polling places, someone was asking the question of voters, who'd you vote for? And among the Biden voters, they were asking, did you know, if you voted for Joe Biden for president, did you know about the Hunter Biden laptop, the Hunter Biden emails that deeply compromised Biden and both Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, and that make it very, very difficult to believe that Joe Biden could ever conduct foreign policy on America's behalf in an honest way because he has received so much money from America's enemies. And it was a very significant percentage of people, of Biden voters, who answered and said, not only did I not know that, I wouldn't have voted for him if I had known that. So if you think that the left-wing media, you might think, well, left-wing media is always left-wing, conservative media is always conservative. That's the way it is. It's okay. There's kind of a balance there. There are literally millions of Americans who listen to CNN and actually think they're listening to news. They actually think they're getting facts. And so they left this 2020 election season not understanding how deeply compromised Joe Biden would be if we ever were to become president. And that is in very large part due to the conduct of news outlets, alleged news outlets, propaganda outlets like CNN. I don't have any sympathy for them. I think they're going to be embarrassed by what is put out there. But at the end of the day, you know what? For people already informed, people who actually understand how this all works, it's not even news. It's not even newsworthy. CNN, of course, they tailor their stories around whatever the left wing tells them to say. Of course, they make Trump look bad every chance they get, make Biden look good no matter how foolish he is. It really isn't news. Maybe to some Americans it'll help them wake up and realize I shouldn't be going to CNN anymore if I actually want news. But for most people, we already knew everything. They're about to hear this in this coming week as you hear these tapes released by Project Veritas. So pay attention. We'll be probably playing some of those clips over the next week or so. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First Five.